According to all accounts, Grovan and Columbus Adair were infamous for their merciless and formidable nature. The savage crime wave orchestrated by these two siblings in the 1870s would have caused notorious outlaws like Frank and Jesse James, or even Billy the Kid, to barricade themselves indoors, peering cautiously from their windows in astonishment. However, you won't find these brothers celebrated on Hollywood's silver screens or glorified in newspaper headlines. The reason is that some acts are so horrific and disturbing, they've remained untold until this moment. Prepare yourself for the authentic tale of two of Appalachia's most ruthless criminals. Before the century turned, execution by hanging was the punishment for the gravest offenses in the Appalachian region. This was necessary because, from the moment pioneers ventured into these rugged mountains, outlaws and fugitives seeking to vanish followed suit. Indeed, there was no lack of tales handed down about the cruel acts and heinous crimes. Among such men, none were more vicious than the Adair brothers from Rutherford County, North Carolina. Following the Civil War, the brothers frequently raided their enemies' residences, relying on firearms and brute force to silence anyone who dared oppose them. The war's turmoil had left the region reeling, with Confederate currency rendered worthless. Property and business owners lost their sway over local politics and law enforcement, allowing the Adair brothers to pillage and devastate without restraint. More often than not, authorities turned a blind eye, dreading the fury of the two siblings. In short, they inspired terror in everyone. Numerous wild and ghastly stories about them circulated around fireplaces during chilly winter evenings when people gathered to discuss recent events. Yet, few could imagine the atrocities so shocking that in later years, people refused to speak their names aloud. Elderly locals would only murmur their tale in hushed tones. The saga began with a cask of whiskey. On April 25th, the Adair brothers, accompanied by their brother-in-law Martin Bernard, broke into a local shop and stole a barrel of liquor in Rutherford County. As the siblings trekked up the mountain, a stranger appeared from the dense thickets. Realizing he'd stumbled into a dangerous situation, he fled through the woods. This individual was Silas Weston, an unassuming farmer and devout man who was hunting squirrels when he encountered the Adair outlaws. Weston resided roughly a mile away in a simple log home with his wife Polly and their 4 children. Silas was well regarded in the community as an upright, diligent man who willingly aided others and regularly attended Otter Creek Baptist Church. In truth, Silas hadn't witnessed anything significant when he came across the Adair brothers, but unbeknownst to him, the siblings spent the rest of the day trailing him back to his cabin. There, they concealed themselves at the forest's edge, observing and biding their time until nightfall. On the night of April 26, 1871, Grovan and Columbus Adair, along with their brother-in-law Martin Bernard, encircled Silas Weston's cabin. Inside, the family was gathered for their evening meal when, oddly, their dog began barking ferociously outside. Silas's wife Polly stood up and peered through a gap in the log walls where the chinking was absent, allowing her to see outside. A sudden burst of noise rang out, striking her directly through the eye at close range from beyond the wall. With a piercing cry, Polly collapsed backward onto the floor, screaming. At that very moment, the front door was forced open, and the brothers instantly began shooting at Silas, who remained seated at the dinner table. As gunfire echoed, filling the cabin with the terrified shrieks of the children, who scrambled to hide behind furniture, Polly, still alive, dragged herself from the kitchen toward the bedroom where her infant child slept. One by one, the murderers hunted down each child in the cabin, subjecting them to a brutal demise. When the shooting stopped, only Polly's sobs from the bedroom echoed through the cabin. Absolute chaos had erupted in the home, but Polly's ordeal was far from over. Hearing her cries, one of the brothers seized her ankle and dragged her out, then aimed his gun and pulled the trigger, but it failed to fire. If Polly believed this was the miracle she prayed for, she was mistaken, as the assailants drew their knives and repeatedly stabbed her in the throat and chest until she ceased moving. This was no ordinary crime. It was a depraved craving for savagery. Assuming the mother was dead, the brothers turned to her infant son, who, despite the horrors, reached out to be lifted when the evil men loomed over him. In an act of sheer malevolence, one of them drew a blade and slashed the baby's throat. 6 lifeless bodies lay strewn across the blood-soaked floor. The father slumped over the table, the mother mutilated, and the children scattered where they fell. The perpetrators swiftly moved to erase evidence of their deeds. They heaped bedding and clothing over Polly's body and ignited it with a burning pine knot, setting it alight, before mounting their horses and fleeing. They took nothing. Their sole intent was to eliminate any witnesses. Yet miraculously, Polly was still alive. She managed to roll on the floor to extinguish the flames, but the fire was rapidly spreading through the cabin. Polly checked each family member, touching them in search of life, but found none until she heard her baby's faint gurgles. He was still alive, so she scooped him up and crawled as far as she could into the yard before collapsing from severe blood loss. Polly immediately identified all 3 culprits, and when the sheriff arrived to apprehend them and revealed that Polly had survived, one brother was utterly shocked and blurted out, "That woman can't possibly still be alive." Gossip quickly spread the news of the murders throughout the region, and newspapers worldwide published the story. Soon, rumors of vigilante mobs seeking retribution were widespread. Authorities urged patience, asking the public to let justice prevail, but ultimately, they relocated the 3 men to Henderson County, North Carolina, to await trial for the murders. During the trial, both Columbus and Grovan Adair denied their guilt and even sneered as Polly testified about the events of that tragic night. Polly would never reunite with her family, but through her sheer determination to survive that night and her bravery on the stand, all 3 men were convicted of murder and arson. Each charge alone in North Carolina warranted the death penalty. By July 1882, the trio awaited their fate in the Henderson County Jail. For weeks, they heard the sounds of hammering, sawing, and the crude jests of workers outside as the gallows were built. One brother, desperate to delay his execution, called for the sheriff and offered a full confession of guilt in exchange for a few more weeks of life. On July 12th, crowds flocked from all directions, men, women, and children arriving by stagecoach, ox cart, horseback, buggy, and on foot. Entire families gathered to witness the spectacle. As the day progressed, there was widespread drinking, chaos, and brawling among the onlookers, with children lifted onto shoulders for a clearer view. At last, a sheriff escorted the 2 brothers at gunpoint to the gallows platform, where he holstered his weapon and read from the Bible, reciting scripture. Neither brother appeared affected and declined to engage with the reading. Instead, they stared defiantly at the crowd. When asked for final words, they only asked to see inside their coffins. After gazing at them for a few moments, they expressed gratitude to the crowd for attending and told the sheriff, "All right, let's give them what they came to see." With that, the trapdoors swung open and the brothers crossed into eternity. Some might ponder how individuals like the Adair brothers became such monsters. Notably, as the 2 men sat lifelessly, their mother waited stoically in a wagon at the base of the gallows to retrieve her sons' bodies, grumbling throughout about the event's duration since she needed to return home to finish her laundry. Perhaps the greatest twist in this tale came next. To fully grasp what follows, recall that this occurred over 150 years ago, before electric lighting, and there remained unresolved matters with the 3rd accomplice, Martin Bernard, the brother-in-law. He was held in the county jail as his postponed execution neared. The jail was dimly illuminated by oil lamps fixed to the corridor walls, and the jailer carried a smoky, oil-burning lantern that emitted faint light. The night before Martin Bernard's scheduled hanging, a woman visited him. The jailer raised his lantern, revealing a woman dressed in the typical mountain attire of the era, a high-necked blouse and a voluminous dress that extended past her ankles, nearly brushing the floor as she moved. Beneath the dress were multiple petticoats. A sunbonnet obscured most of her face. In the lantern's dim glow, the jailer recognized Mrs. Bernard, the wife of the condemned man. She pleaded with the jailer to allow her to spend the final night in the cell with her husband, who faced execution at dawn. The compassionate jailer granted her wish. The next morning, as dawn broke, the jailer went to release Mrs. Bernard. There was a final embrace in the cell, and the wife, with her sunbonnet pulled low, head bowed, and hands covering her face as she softly wept, followed the jailer down the corridor and vanished around a corner. About an hour later, the jailer delivered the condemned man's final breakfast to his cell. Sitting on the cot, dressed in men's clothing, was Mrs. Bernard, whom the jailer believed he had released earlier. It emerged that the weeping figure he had escorted out was actually Martin Bernard. The couple had switched clothes during the night. Bernard's allies had a horse ready, and he successfully fled to Texas, where his wife later joined him, never to be seen again. He had somehow evaded justice, at least in this life. Today, a marker stands to honor the memory of the Weston family, lost on that tragic night in 1871. This memorial is located at Round Hill Baptist Church Cemetery. May the Weston family rest in peace.